Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. We are all waiting passionately for the temperatures this weekend to drop significantly below zeros, which might lead for Ukrainians to restarting their significant offensive operations, and maybe we'll see a significant developments on the battle lines in favor of Ukraine. But let's talk about this, and I will get you up to speed. What's the situation on the front lines? On the northern part, the only major thing that I can say, the activity here is mostly have stalled. So far, either both sides are preparing for the coming weekend and then want to do the push then and just wait a little bit. But we definitely know that I remember I told you that Russians have sent in their reinforcements around Kremlin, and we definitely know that it has helped them secure the positions both south of Kremlin and also reinforced positions just north of Kremlin. So again, we're going to be seeing what's going to happen over this weekend. So far, no significant developments in this northern part. Maybe tactical fighting here and there for certain villages. The biggest story for you to be aware of and what I'm following the most is what's happening around Soledar. So Soledar, Russians have been trying to essentially get into Bakhmut multiple times. You know that. But now they thought that, well, we had success of Yakovlivka. And Yakovlivka is essentially a gateway to advance towards north of Soledar, obviously if they have enough power. And then Soledar, if Soledar falls, that's kind of the start of advancing from the north towards Bakhmut to essentially cut off the north supply of Bakhmut. And that's the plan. So Russians were looking at this and they say, okay, we were able to take Yakovlivka. There was for a while fighting around Yakovlivka. And now Russians were able to essentially secure their positions around Yakovlivka. So now they're thinking, okay, so Soledar is our big target. Let's try to see if we can get Soledar into the pinch, and maybe we'll gonna advance their positions, because Soledar has been a defensive line almost as long, if not longer, than Bakhmut was, because it was counted on as being just like a target on the way to Bakhmut, but it turned out to be a complete meat grinder for the Russians. And because of the way Soledar is made, it's just an impossible task for the Russians to take it. So what Russians are hoping for is essentially to attack Soledar both from the north and from the south and also from the front. And we have reports that the fighting there intensified significantly in the recent days. And there's also reports that 5 battalions of VDV have been sent to reinforce this attack to Soledar. VDV is a part of the core Russian specialized troops that's been used in this war. And in this war, they've proven themselves quite capable. Obviously, if we don't count the assault on Hostomel, which was terrible, but we gotta say that the troops themselves were fighting quite okay. It's just the planning of that operation was complete idiotic. A lot of VDVs were slaughtered in Hostomel, so big thanks Operator Starsky for that. But there is also plenty of them that remained. And compared to other Russian troops, they showed themselves to be quite capable. And this brings two kind of important things. The first one is that Russians took the wrong lessons from this. VDV has always had this kind of clout around them. There was always the popular, there was always the the hot shit that a lot of the Russians wanted to participate in. And this also led to the idea that, not the idea, this led to the fact that they were financed a lot better than other units inside of Russian army. So that meant that compared to normal Russian grunts, they were just better trained, better equipped, and so on. What unfortunately Russian military took from this campaign when the fighting started and then a lot of mobilized troops ran and a lot of other forces were just slaughtered, and VGV was able, for example, in Kherson to stand their ground quite firmly and be a very battle-capable force that also is very mobile and very nice to have, and they were actually fighting quite well, which would many Ukrainian defenders tell you. The idea of that led Russians to believe that, hey, That means we need to have more VDV and send them to perform tasks that they're not even specialized. Like a lot of what VDV has been doing during this war was actually something just a normal army rifle, like a motorized regiments, should have been doing. And they were doing it instead. So now Russian military wants to double down on the amount of VDVs instead of taking lessons of training their normal regular troops in the army, which is a completely wrong lesson that they should have learned. But that doesn't matter. Like, and I'm not scared of suggesting any kind of solutions because that's not an easy fix. It's not going to impact this war. What is more important is a lot of people seem to misunderstood where did these 5 battalions of VDV come from. Like, weren't all of the VDV destroyed during the fight of Hostomel? And the answer is no. We need to understand that while, yes, Northern Kiev offensive was quite terrible, and a lot of VDV guys did indeed suffer significant casualties, many were also engaged on other fronts, and many of them survived. And we also know that after mobilization have started, the first parts of mobilization, when Russians were calling in on the volunteers, like combat veterans, if you remember that time around May, there was also reservists, people that just left the service, tried to get asked to come back. So they were able to essentially reform some of the units for VDV later on. And these VDV forces, they've been engaged on, for example, Kherson offensive quite extensively. They were also on the Kherson offensive. When Kherson offensive withdrawal was announced, it was the VDV forces that Russia tried to spare. This is the small core part of what Russian military still have that are significantly battle capable. And also, people seem to misunderstand like how much troops Russia is also having. And Russia started with about 200,000 troops at the beginning. As Kiev offensive proven itself to be completely disastrous, it was around that time that they started calling in a lot of reservists, a lot of volunteers. They started significantly force mobilizing the people on the occupied territories. They've tried to push the different agendas, tried to provide additional financial incentives. So for a longer part of this war, Russia was fighting, yes, and a lot of Russian core units suffered significant casualties. But Russians also tried to be very sparing to a lot of the elite units, such as VDV, past their disastrous entrance from the beginning. And they've been reinforced since then as well. Well, refurbished, let's put it this way, with people with experience. So VDV that was engaged in Kherson, they don't have that big of an amount of mobilized troops inside of them. They are still combat either veterans or reinforced veterans that's been added to the units, and they still have a high morale and high proficiency with the equipment they're using compared to the rest of the Russian military, don't get me wrong. Right now, Russian military in Ukraine is about 200,000, roughly. I'm speaking roughly, of which just over half, about 60%, is mobilized troops. So there is still about 40% of 200,000, so under 100,000, which can be considered either Russian core elite troops that were reinforced with combat veterans, or some kind of significantly battle capable units, for example, from the like a terrorist parts that Russia tried to train over the years, and essentially also mercenaries from Wagners. They're also quite battle capables. But they're also using a lot of buffer of less capable troops to enhance the battle capabilities and preserve their more battle capable troops. So that's why the most known example is the fact that they're using prisoners. So they're sending the prisoners in waves towards the enemy positions to get them slaughtered, but send it wave after wave after wave after wave, and then at some point one of the wave kind of hits the target, and at that moment they say, okay, now the trained Wagner troops can actually hit that spot where the position was weakened. So in that moment they strike with battle capable troops into the weakened position inside Bakhmut. So that's what makes it hard to fight against the Russians, because they have a lot of chaff that they are using to weaken the Ukrainians. And the third idea also around Bakhmut is that people don't understand, well, if it's just human waves, why does it make it so hard? Don't units there know what to do? We need to understand that war is always messy. It's never clean. Like, it's never people just are mindless units that don't know. People can get wary, they can wander off, they don't know stuff and so on, especially because Ukrainian forces, they've also suffered casualties in some of their units, and they've been reinforced with mobilized troops. And while they've been learning on the way, and the training has been extensive, a lot of the battle and experience knowledge that comes only in a multi-year war career, like military career, is just not being possessed by even well-trained mobilized troops as of Ukrainians. So some of the positions might be well enough to be defended against, for example, like imagine like you have an evening and you have a wave, and then like you fight off this fight, and then that's another wave, and then it's another wave, and it's another wave. And just some mobilized troops and like commanders that already proven themselves. That's not that they're super inexperienced, but they just like at some point it's like, okay, we don't really know how to organize things around here, and at some moment this can create a weak point inside of defense of Ukraine's, because it doesn't, like, not individual units fight, it's always about the defense lines. So some weak points in the Ukrainian defense lines tend to happen, and that's where the casualties come in for the Ukrainian troops, unfortunately. But with that small tangent, I hope I covered the main points about where did these five brigades of VDV come from, and how are they still alive. Bakhmut itself has been quite tough again in the recent days. The reports are that Russians have received additional weapons shipments, like it was a little bit silent for some time, and now there are additional fightings going on. So the reports are the fighting is hard, but Bakhmut is fine. A little bit less of a fighting around Avdiivka. It's very local. So far, nothing there. And there are some fighting on the front lines around the south, but it's again more of a tactical fighting. Russians were able to essentially enter one small village that Ukrainians controlled, but then like half a day later, they just got kicked out again. So that's the sense of a scale of fighting, and then obviously artillery shooting each other from all sides. That is it for the update this midweek. I think we're going to have more news to talk about during this weekend. So thank you so much for watching. Big thanks to all of the people that are subscribed and supporting this channel. I am donating at least 50% of the profits of this channel to Ukrainian military. But if you want to help, I would recommend you go into the first attached comment to this video and donate directly to Ukrainian military or humanitarian efforts. Thank you so much. I love you all. Have a great day.